I couldn't breathe when I saw the red bow glinting under the tree lights, the kind of bow that belonged on a commercial, not in my parents' driveway. My sister screamed, her voice piercing through the quiet hum of Christmas morning, as she dangled a brand new BMW key between her fingers like it was a trophy for being born. Dad laughed, clapping her on the back, while Mom covered her mouth in fake surprise, as if she hadn't planned this months ago. I stood there, barefoot on the cold hardwood, holding a plastic piggy bank that still had the $1.99 price tag on it. Two crisp $1 bills fell from the bottom when I opened it. And for a second, I thought it was a joke. But no one laughed. "It's for your future home fund," Dad said, waving it off, already turning back toward Chelsea. "You're so responsible with money. You don't need much to get started." Responsible. That word was their favorite leash. It meant, we'll depend on you when it's convenient, ignore you when it's not. Chelsea hugged them, pretending to cry while the camera flashed. The BMW sat outside, the December sun bouncing off its spotless hood. I could see my reflection in it, small, blurry, disposable. I had spent 2 weeks' salary on my dad's leather briefcase, months saving for the silver bracelet Mom wanted, and bought Chelsea a professional camera lens she'd casually mentioned. None of them noticed the effort. They never did. When I handed them my gifts, they smiled the way you smile at a stranger's child in a grocery store, polite, distant, empty. I had rehearsed my own news for days. I'd been promoted to senior structural engineer, something I'd worked toward for nearly a decade. I wanted them to be proud. To maybe look at me the way they looked at Chelsea, like I was worth celebrating. But as I opened my mouth, Chelsea squealed again, running to the window. "Look! They even got it detailed with custom interiors." Her voice drowned me out, my announcement collapsing before it could breathe. Mom gushed about how clients expect presentation, while Dad nodded like it was gospel. I sat down, numb, holding the cheap piggy bank in my lap. The smell of pine and wrapping paper turned sour in my throat. The rest of the morning blurred into noise, Chelsea posing for pictures, Dad bragging about how proud he was, Mom calling relatives to tell them about the surprise. I stayed quiet, my heart beating like a trapped bird. When I finally stood up, I heard myself say, "Excuse me. Bathroom." My voice didn't sound like mine. I walked past the wall of family photos, every frame featuring Chelsea's smile and some milestone moment, graduations, birthdays, vacations. I wasn't invisible, just absent. I closed the bathroom door, locked it, and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked calm, but something inside me cracked open. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. The hurt was too deep, too practiced. I pressed my hands to the marble counter until my knuckles turned white. This isn't an accident, I thought. This is who they've always been. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, the same faded wallpaper, the same faint smell of dust and lavender. Chelsea's laughter drifted up the stairs as she planned her first road trip with Mom and Dad. Every giggle felt like a knife. I stared at the ceiling until the clock read 2:17 a.m., and something inside me shifted. Quietly, I packed my suitcase. I didn't take much: the old teddy bear Grandma gave me, a photo album, my first blueprint, the essentials. I left everything else behind. The expensive gifts I'd bought them stayed wrapped under the tree. They didn't need more from me. They already had everything they wanted. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, the house key cold in my hand, and placed it beside the coffee maker. That was my goodbye. No note. No confrontation. Just silence. The road stretched endlessly as I drove through the falling snow. The radio played Bing Crosby, his voice too cheerful, too cruelly nostalgic. I turned it off. The highway was empty, lit only by the glow of streetlights blurring into halos. My Toyota hummed beneath me, steady, loyal, mine. Unlike that BMW in their driveway, my car had history. It had carried me through college, through job interviews, through loneliness. It was freedom on 4 wheels. Around dawn, my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed across the screen. For one stupid, hopeful second, I thought she might ask if I was okay. Instead, her message read, "Did you remember to pay the cabin's electric bill before you left?" The cabin they used for Chelsea's Instagram photos. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound, and let the phone fall into the passenger seat. I kept driving. Every mile unspooled a memory: Chelsea's 5th birthday, her 3-tier princess cake and pony rides. Mine the year after? 2 friends, grocery store cake, plastic plates. Dad's excuse: "Your sister needs social stimulation." High school graduation, valedictorian speech, empty family seats. They were at Chelsea's soccer game. "You always succeed without our help," Mom had said later. Their code for, "You don't need us." I worked through college, juggled 2 jobs, took extra classes to graduate early. Chelsea backpacked through Europe on their dime to find herself. Dad said, "You've always known who you are." Translation: "You don't deserve exploration." Every word, every slight built the foundation of who I'd become: quiet, competent, invisible.by sunrise, I crossed the Oregon border. My phone showed 17 missed calls, 32 unread messages. I turned off notifications and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The silence was heavy, but it was mine. When I stopped at a small roadside diner, an older waitress named Gloria poured me coffee before I even spoke. "Rough night?" she asked. "Rough life," I muttered, instantly regretting it. But she smiled kindly. "Family or boyfriend?" "Family," I admitted. She nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times. "Honey, blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family." I stared at her, the words settling deep inside me. She walked away, leaving me with coffee, bacon, and a truth I'd never had the courage to say aloud. 3 weeks later, I was in San Francisco, sleeping in the spare room of my friend Monica's apartment. She was my college roommate, the one who had seen it all, the packages of practical stuff my parents sent me while Chelsea got designer clothes, the lonely holiday breaks when they took trips without me. Monica didn't ask for explanations. She just said, "Stay as long as you need." I tried to rebuild myself quietly, working remotely, applying for transfers. Some mornings I woke up expecting guilt to crawl back in. But each day, the weight lightened a little. I found a therapist who told me something that stuck: love without respect isn't love. It's control. The first time I ignored one of Dad's voicemails, my hands shook. By the 10th, I felt steady. His messages turned from confusion to anger, then to threats: "If you don't return that car, I'll report it stolen." The car was mine, legally mine. But control doesn't vanish easily. Mom's messages were guilt-wrapped grenades. "My blood pressure's high from the stress you're causing," she said. "Is that what you want, for me to end up in the hospital?" I didn't respond. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. "Monica found me like that once and just said, 'You're allowed to protect your peace.'" When the transfer approval came through, I cried, not because I was sad, but because for the first time, something happened entirely on my own terms. San Francisco felt like a new planet. I found an apartment with sunlight streaming through terracotta walls and a view of the bay that reminded me life could still be beautiful. I worked long hours, designed buildings that would outlive me, and took pottery classes at night. There was something healing about shaping clay, molding chaos into form. Every week since I'd left, I saved a $2 bill and placed it into the same piggy bank my parents gave me. It became my quiet rebellion, a tally of freedom. One morning, I woke up to another voicemail, Chelsea this time. Her voice was softer, hesitant. "Mom's been crying. Dad's furious. They think you hate us." I didn't reply, but the ache that used to follow her calls wasn't there anymore. Just distance. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and looked at my new project, a bridge design that symbolized stability, strength, and balance. Exactly what I'd been building inside myself, but peace never stays untouched. One afternoon, an email arrived from my cousin: "Family wedding. You're invited." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part whispered, "Maybe it's time." I'd built walls, but some closures needed doors. When I finally RSVP'd yes, I didn't do it for them. I did it for the version of me who'd stood in that bathroom mirror, shaking and silent. The woman who thought leaving meant losing everything. She deserved to see what self-worth looked like when it stopped asking for permission. As the flight confirmation landed in my inbox, my hands trembled, not with fear, but anticipation. 7 months had passed since I walked out of that house. I wasn't the same woman anymore. And if they expected the quiet, compliant daughter to return, they were about to meet someone they'd never bothered to see before. The hotel room smelled faintly of lemon polish and new beginnings. I had arrived in Portland the night before the wedding, checked into a quiet corner suite overlooking the river, and unpacked my suitcase like someone setting up a base camp before a climb. My dress hung by the window, midnight blue silk catching every flicker of light from the city below. It wasn't soft or forgiving, it was sharp, deliberate, the color of confidence. Monica had helped me choose it, insisting that the right shade could do what words often failed to. "You don't owe them your pain," she'd said, helping me zip the garment bag. "You owe yourself closure." I repeated that now as I brushed my hair into a sleek bun, staring at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. I looked composed, but underneath, something in me hummed like a fault line before it breaks. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, another message from Dad, unread. Then another from Mom, begging me to stay with the family instead of at a hotel. I'd ignored both, but the silence that followed carried its own tension, like the eye of a storm. Outside, the morning mist curled over the water, softening the skyline, but nothing could blur what was coming. I'd promised myself this trip wasn't about revenge. It was about proof that I could walk back into that world and not let it break me again. Still, as I slipped on my heels and caught my reflection once more, I whispered under my breath, "You can do this." The rehearsal dinner was held at a country club so pristine it looked more like a set than a place real people inhabited. Laughter echoed off marble floors, waiters glided past with champagne, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. I stepped through the doors, and time seemed to pause. Every conversation faltered, every glass halted midair. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father's jaw clenched. Chelsea was the first to recover, her surprise melting into a polished smile. "Emily!" she exclaimed, moving forward with arms wide, as if nothing had ever happened. I let her hug me, my hands remaining at my sides. She smelled faintly of citrus and exhaustion. "You look incredible," she said, stepping back to scan my outfit. "San Francisco must be treating you well." I smiled, small but real. "It is." Mom approached next, voice trembling in that carefully curated way she used when she wanted control through sympathy. "We've missed you so much, sweetheart." Her eyes darted to the diamond studs in my ears, the designer clutch, the quiet confidence she didn't recognize. "You look different." "I am different," I said simply. Dad hovered behind her, his glass already half empty. "You didn't call," he said, like an accusation. "You didn't listen," I replied. He looked ready to argue, but Aunt Martha appeared, wrapping me in an embrace that smelled like vanilla and honesty. "You've done well for yourself, Em," she whispered. "Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for it." The rest of the evening unfolded like a play I'd already read the script for. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to know about my job, my apartment, my big city life. Uncle Simon asked if I'd finally forgiven my parents. I deflected with grace, the way you learn to do when you've built emotional armor out of therapy sessions and solitude. Across the room, Chelsea's laugh rose and fell, but it lacked the easy sparkle it used to have. Her eyes darted toward me often, measuring, maybe comparing. It wasn't competition anymore, it was recognition. For the first time, she was seeing me not as the backup character in her story, but as the protagonist of mine. When the toasts began, I stood near the bar, letting the noise wash over me. My father raised his glass to family unity, and the irony almost made me choke on my drink. My mother dabbed her eyes as if on cue, and I realized the act hadn't changed, it was just that I'd stopped buying tickets to the performance. During dessert, a cousin whispered that my parents were selling the house. "Financial issues," she said. "Word is your dad's been out of work for months." I nodded politely, but something in me twisted. Not sympathy exactly, just the strange dissonance of realizing the fortress you escaped from was already crumbling on its own. After dinner, I stepped outside to breathe. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and distant rain. I had barely taken 2 breaths before Chelsea followed, her heels clicking across the stone patio. "You left without saying goodbye," she said. The sentence carried more hurt than accusation. "There wasn't much left to say," I replied. She leaned against the railing, eyes glistening. "I'm trying, you know. Things haven't been easy since you left. The business went under, Dad lost his job, Mom's not herself. Everyone says it's because you cut us off." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. "That's convenient," I said softly. "Blaming me for consequences they built long before I walked away." "You don't have to be so cold," she snapped. "I'm being clear," I corrected. "There's a difference." Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, I saw not the golden child but a woman cracked by expectations she'd never questioned. "I wish we could start over," she said. I met her gaze. "Starting over means acknowledging what was broken. Not pretending it never happened." She didn't answer. The wind picked up, carrying laughter from inside. I glanced through the window, Dad holding court near the bar, Mom whispering dramatically to a cluster of relatives. They were spinning their narrative already. I could almost hear it. "Emily's ungrateful. She's changed. Money made her cold." Maybe they were right. Maybe independence had frozen the part of me that once melted at their approval. But cold wasn't always cruel. Sometimes it was survival. When I returned to my hotel that night, I couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered across the ceiling like thoughts I couldn't shut off. I replayed every look, every word, every hidden tremor of guilt they tried to project onto me. My therapist's voice echoed in my head, "Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks you control." I turned off my phone, wrapped myself in the blanket, and breathed. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Morning arrived with fog and nerves. I met Monica downstairs. She'd flown in to be my +1 and moral backup. "You sure you're ready?" she asked as we climbed into the rental car. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But I'm going anyway." The drive to Magnolia Gardens took us through winding roads lined with maple trees, their leaves still clinging to autumn even as winter crept closer. It felt poetic somehow, holding on and letting go at once. The venue appeared like something out of a fairy tale, stone archways, glass ceilings, manicured lawns that didn't look real. Inside, the air buzzed with wedding chaos, hairspray, laughter, music rehearsals. Cousin Vanessa glowed in her gown, surrounded by bridesmaids fluttering like pastel butterflies. "Emily, you made it." she said, hugging me tightly. I'm so glad. Things have been tense. Her eyes flicked toward the far corner, where my parents stood speaking to the officiant. Even from across the room, I could feel the static of their presence. They've been asking about you non-stop, she added. I told them you'd come. On my terms, I said quietly. She didn't ask what that meant. During the ceremony rehearsal, I kept to the back, focusing on Vanessa's happiness rather than the eyes occasionally darting my way. But the whispers were impossible to ignore, bits of gossip about my big job, my city salary, the mystery boyfriend. They always needed a story to make sense of my existence. As if success had to be explained or justified. After rehearsal, as I reached for my coat, my mother appeared, expression soft but purposeful. Can we talk? She asked. Tomorrow, I said, heading for the door. Before the ceremony. She hesitated. It's important. It always is, I replied without stopping. That night, I sat by the hotel window, staring at the river again. The reflection of streetlights rippled across the surface, fractured but still shining. It reminded me of myself, broken, maybe, but still reflecting something beautiful. My phone vibrated. This time, it was Chelsea. Please come to the library before the ceremony tomorrow. Mom says it's urgent. I typed a response, then deleted it. Then typed again. Fine. 30 minutes before, when I arrived the next day, the air inside Magnolia Gardens felt charged, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Vanessa was radiant, her dress shimmering under the morning sun, her joy untainted by the undercurrent running beneath everything else. Guests bustled, photographers positioned themselves, but my mind was already miles away, replaying every word Chelsea had said. They think it's your fault. Maybe they did. Maybe that was easier than facing themselves. As I walked down the corridor toward the library, I passed portraits of old estates and perfectly symmetrical gardens. Balance, order, symmetry, things my family never had. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing like a countdown. At the door, I paused, hand hovering over the handle. I could hear voices inside, Dad's low rumble, Mom's high-pitched urgency, Chelsea's pleading tone. Whatever waited for me beyond that door wasn't peace. It was reckoning. I straightened my shoulders, inhaled deeply, and turned the knob. Dad's voice carried the same weight it always had, calm on the surface, a storm underneath. Sit down, Emily. He gestured to the empty chair across from them, perfectly placed like an interrogation seat. The ceremony would start in 40 minutes, but this felt like the main event, the confrontation they'd been waiting for. I didn't move. My fingers stayed curled around the door handle. I'm listening, I said. Chelsea took a cautious step forward, her tone dripping with something rehearsed. This has gone too far, Emily. Dad lost his job 3 months ago. Mom's been seeing a therapist for depression. She paused dramatically, as if waiting for me to crumble. We're selling the house. The way she said it felt like a dagger meant to hit guilt, not compassion. I blinked once, twice. 7 months ago, that line would have destroyed me. I would have apologized, offered money, begged for forgiveness for something that wasn't my fault. But now, sitting in this cold room filled with ghosts of manipulation, I only felt distance, like watching a movie I'd already seen too many times. I walked to the chair and sat down slowly, placing my purse beside me. I'm sorry to hear about your job, Dad, I said evenly. And Mom, I'm glad you're getting help. Their confusion hung heavy in the air. They expected tears. They got composure. Didn't you hear what we said? Chelsea snapped, her voice cracking. They're selling the house because of you. I smiled faintly. No, they're selling it because of choices they made long before I left. Dad's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. I am, I said softly. For once, I'm watching everything. From my purse, I pulled out a leather-bound album and set it on my lap. I brought something to show you. Mom frowned. We don't have time for this. You called this meeting, I reminded her. So we have time. I opened the album. The first page was a split-screen memory, Chelsea's lavish princess birthday with entertainers, my own the same year, a store-bought cake on a chipped kitchen table. Remember these? I turned the pages slowly, each one filled with the pattern I'd spent months documenting. Christmas mornings with uneven piles of gifts. Graduation pictures where I stood in the background. Vacations where I was the one holding the camera. Dad's face turned red. This is ridiculous. We always treated you girls equally. I reached into my bag again and placed a small folder beside the album. My student loans, I said. $67,000 I'm still paying off. Chelsea's tuition, fully funded, including her art trip to Europe. Chelsea shifted, her perfect composure cracking. That's not fair. You chose engineering. It was my passion, I said quietly. Just like art was yours. The difference is, my passion wasn't considered worth investing in. Mom rose, trembling. We didn't have the money when you went to college. Things were different when Chelsea, I learned everything about your finances years ago, I cut in. Dad's promotion came when I was 16. Grandma's inheritance arrived before my freshman year. You had the money. You just didn't spend it on me. The silence that followed was heavy and merciless. I reached back into my purse and pulled out a small pink plastic piggy bank, the same one they'd gifted me that Christmas morning, the one that started it all. Its hollow sound echoed as I placed it on the coffee table. Dad scoffed. What is this nonsense? I turned it upside down and pulled the rubber stopper. Dozens of crisp $2 bills fluttered onto the table like tiny green feathers. I've saved one every week since I left, I said. This isn't about money. It's about what you thought I was worth. The room went still. Even Chelsea, always ready with a retort, stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the pile of bills. She picked one up, her fingers shaking slightly. I never realized how it looked from your side. Her voice sounded fragile, almost human. They never taught me to stand on my own, I replied. The door to the hall creaked. Voices from the wedding reception filtered through, laughter, glasses clinking, the sound of life continuing beyond our broken circle. I don't want apologies, I said finally. I want change. Family therapy and respect for my boundaries. Those are my conditions. Dad opened his mouth to protest, but Mom reached out, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. We'll do it. Whatever it takes. I nodded once. I stood up, gathering my album and folder. But I left the $2 bills scattered across the table. That's yours to keep, I said quietly. A reminder of what happens when you measure love by convenience. When I reached the door, Chelsea's whisper followed me like a ghost. She's different now. Dad's voice, brittle, answered, she's right. I paused for only a moment, hand on the doorknob, feeling something break and mend at the same time. Then I walked out into the corridor filled with music and candlelight, my heels clicking in rhythm with my heartbeat. The wedding was about to start, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading being part of something beautiful. I found my seat beside Monica. She squeezed my hand without asking questions, her eyes saying everything. Across the aisle, my family entered quietly, smaller somehow, as if the truth had deflated the illusion they'd lived inside for decades. When the bride began her walk, everyone stood. I stayed seated for a moment, taking in the music, the warmth, the hum of life moving forward. That's when I realized the storm inside me had finally gone still, but peace, I learned, doesn't mean silence, it means the courage to stay calm in the noise. And as the ceremony ended, and the world outside the church erupted in laughter and bells, my phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Chelsea, you were right. I'm sorry. Another followed seconds later, can we start over? I didn't reply. Not yet. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt overnight, they need new foundations. The night ended with me standing on the balcony of my San Francisco apartment. The skyline stretched like an old promise finally fulfilled. Elliot came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I whispered. Better than okay. Inside, the piggy bank sat on the mantel. Half filled again, but this time with $1 bills. Not to measure pain, but progress, and as the lights of the city blinked below, I finally understood that worth isn't what others give you, it's what you decide never to give away again. By the time the plane touched down in San Francisco, the world outside the cabin window shimmered in the soft glow of winter sunlight. And for the first time in years, my heart didn't ache at the thought of returning home. Home wasn't a place anymore, it was a state of peace I'd built from scratch. 1 year had passed since that night I left with nothing but 2 crumpled bills and a heart full of quiet rage. Now, the piggy bank that once mocked me sat proudly on my mantel, its hollow belly filled with small reminders of freedom. My apartment smelled of rosemary and sage, the turkey roasting in the oven humming beneath the sound of laughter drifting from the living room. Monica was swirling a glass of red wine, teasing Elliot about his inability to cook without turning the kitchen into a battlefield. My coworkers from the firm, a few faces from pottery class, and even my therapist Dr. Winters, who had somehow become more friend than clinician, filled the space with warmth. I watched them all, the people who chose to be here, who saw me not for what I could give, but for who I was. When Monica raised her glass and said, to Emily, who builds bridges better than anyone I know, both at work and in life, I felt something loosen deep inside me. For years, I had begged for that kind of acknowledgement from my family, only to realize that true validation didn't come from blood but from belonging. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share, your support keeps the stories coming. Elliot leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine. His voice low but steady as he added, and to Senior Project Manager Collins, whose team finished Richardson Tower 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Laughter rippled through the room. But beneath it was pride, mine, earned and quiet and real. When the kitchen timer chimed, I excused myself, grateful for the small interruption that let me breathe through the lump in my throat. Elliot followed, asking if I needed help. I've got it, I said automatically, the words that had defined my life. Then I remembered Dr. Winter's voice, accepting help doesn't weaken you. I turned, smiling. Actually, could you carve the turkey? I never learned how. He grinned, picked up the knife, and got to work like it was the most natural thing in the world. My phone buzzed just then, lighting up the counter. A video call from Chelsea. For a second, I hesitated, half expecting the old performance, the tears, the guilt, the excuses, but curiosity won. "Merry Christmas," she said when her face filled the screen. She looked different. Softer. The background wasn't the designer apartment she used to flaunt on Instagram, it was smaller, cluttered, lived in. "You look happy," she said, her smile hesitant but real. "Your place looks beautiful." I turned the camera slightly to show her the pottery studio tucked into the spare room. Shelves lined with bowls and vases, each one shaped from the clay I once thought would never become anything. "It feels like home," I said. "How are Mom and Dad?" Chelsea hesitated, adjusting her phone before revealing Dad sitting in a modest apartment living room, a cup of coffee in his hands instead of bourbon. "He's 90 days sober," she said softly. "He wanted me to tell you." The man who used to fill every silence with judgment now just nodded, eyes clearer, smaller somehow, like time had stripped him of his old armor. "That's good," I managed, my voice catching. "I'm proud of him." "Mom's still volunteering at the community center," Chelsea added. She wanted to join the call but had an emergency food drive. "They ask about you, not in the old way, though." The corners of my mouth lifted. "That's progress," I said. We talked for a few more minutes about small things, her new job at a design studio, the rent she finally paid on her own, the pottery class she'd just started. When she showed me a lopsided clay ornament shaped like a heart, I laughed. "It's not pretty," she admitted. "But I made it myself." I wanted to tell her how proud I was but instead said, "Mail it when you're ready." Because this time, I meant it, no expectations, no strings. After we hung up, I stood for a moment, phone in hand, absorbing the quiet. There was no ache, no bitterness left, just gratitude for the distance that had allowed healing to happen. In the living room, Elliot was laughing at something Monica said, and for a second, I saw the reflection of my life like a photograph, soft light, gentle faces, and a woman at peace. The clock struck 7, and we gathered around the table. I glanced at the piggy bank on the mantel. It wasn't just filled with $2 bills anymore. It held single ones, each one representing a lesson rather than a wound. Freedom, forgiveness, boundaries, worth, words I'd written on slips of paper tucked between the bills. Elliot carved the turkey perfectly, and as he handed me a plate, his fingers brushed mine, steady, sure. "To new traditions," he said. After dinner, when everyone had left and the apartment was quiet again, I noticed 2 new messages on my phone. The first was from Chelsea, a photo of her clay ornament, captioned, "Not perfect, but made with love." The second was from Mom. The preview showed an attachment, and curiosity pulled me in. "Found this in the attic while downsizing," her message read. "It always belonged to you." I opened it. There was a photo of my childhood dollhouse, the one thing I'd loved more than anything growing up, the one they'd given to Chelsea when I left. Beneath it, the image of a deed transfer. My name printed clean and certain. I set the phone down slowly, the tears that rose this time soft, not painful. That dollhouse had been the only place I controlled the story, the only space where everyone got treated fairly, every room balanced, every figure loved. Maybe now, it was coming back to me because I'd finally built that fairness in real life. Elliot came up behind me, looping his arms around my shoulders. "Deep thoughts?" he asked. "Just grateful," I said, turning to face him. "Sometimes the greatest gift is realizing what you won't accept anymore." He smiled and pressed a kiss to my forehead, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to earn it. I stepped onto the balcony, the December air crisp against my cheeks. Below, the city glittered, bridges I'd helped design stretched across the bay, their reflections shimmering like promises kept. For years, I'd measured my worth by the love I couldn't win. Now, I measured it by the peace I refused to lose. Inside, the lights from my apartment spilled onto the balcony, landing on the piggy bank through the glass. It wasn't a symbol of rejection anymore. It was a monument to everything I'd survived. Behind me, Elliot called out, "You coming back in?" "In a minute," I said, looking out at the skyline one last time. "I just need to remember this." Because this was the ending I'd built with my own hands, a quiet, powerful life that didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. The laughter inside grew louder, warm and alive. And I finally turned away from the view, stepping back into the light. Knowing that the woman who once walked away with $2 had come back with something priceless, herself.